Previously, Fang Yuan crushed Fang Zheng in the year-end examination and stepped beyond the academy as a true Gu master. Now forced into Jiao San's team, he faces hidden schemes, a desperate breakthrough into rank 2, and a deadly beast tied beneath King Mao Mountain. Let us continue with Reverend Insanity, Episode 8. The entire training ground seemed to boil over the moment everyone saw Fang Zheng being pressed. So hard that he had no strength left to turn the tables. Almost all the students below immediately took his side. One shouted, another answered, and in only an instant the cries had joined into a great wave. Down with Fang Yuan, Fang Zheng, get up. We believe in you, those shouts poured into Fang Zheng's ears. And at the same time, old scenes began surfacing in his mind one after another. The days when he was little, walking behind his elder brother beneath the pointing gazes of the clansmen. The times when his uncle and aunt always told him he should learn from Fang Yuan. The words the clan leader had once spoken to him under the moon, that in the end the darkness in one's heart still had to be overcome by oneself. Shen Kui's expectant gaze, the faces of his classmates who had once placed their hopes on him. Hoping he would defeat his elder brother. Hoping he would end the days when they were all being suppressed. One person after another, one sentence after another, all of it seemed to converge into this exact moment. And because of that, lying beneath the pressure of that kick, Fang Zheng did not collapse completely the way people expected. On the contrary. His heartbeat only grew stronger and stronger, his blood seemed to boil. And his whole body felt as though it had been pushed toward a brand new limit. Then he roared. A roar as though he wanted to tear apart every grievance, fear, and darkness that had been buried inside him for so long. And at the same time, a jade green light began to appear over his body. It was Jade Skin Gu. At that instant, the whole training ground erupted once again. The students roared. The Gu masters watching were pulled along by the emotion of it. And even clan leader Gu Yue Jiao could not hold himself back from springing to his feet, because in his eyes, this was not merely a Gu worm kept hidden until the final moment. But the moment an A-grade genius truly rose out of the darkness inside himself. And indeed, from the outside, the situation now seemed to have tilted completely. With Jade Skin Gu, Fang Zheng's defense had almost visibly increased. Ordinary moonblades would find it hard to pierce through. Even those standing below the stage like Yao Hong, King Shu, or Mo Yan all quickly came to the same conclusion. If one judged only from appearances, victory now was almost already beckoning to Fang Zheng. The two brothers once again stood facing each other on the battle stage. The distance between them was very short, yet it felt as though an entire abyss lay between them. Fang Zheng's face was now covered in jade green light. And his eyes burned, as though he had finally found the chance to smash apart the shadow that had haunted him for so long. Fang Yuan, by contrast, remained as cold as ever, his gaze almost not wavering in the slightest. Fang Zheng believed he could already see victory. In his mind, the logic was very clear. Jade Skin Gu was enough to withstand moonblades. And without a strength-type Gu like Flower Boar Gu or barbaric strength Heavenly Bull Gu, how could Fang Yuan's fists possibly break through that defensive layer? But Fang Yuan did not explain, he only answered with action. His right arm drew back like a bowstring, and in the next instant his fist smashed straight into Fang Zheng's cheek. Bang. The impact rang out heavily. Blood sprayed, and the jade light covering Fang Zheng's face shattered into fragments of brightness that dissolved immediately into the air. Not only the students below the stage, even Fang Zheng himself could not understand in time what had just happened. But before he could recover, the second punch had already come. This time it was the left hand. Another heavy crash rang out, the other side of his face was struck, blood burst out again, and the jade light shattered once more. With only 2 punches, the confidence that had just flared up in the hearts of so many people was almost smashed apart right before their eyes. Fang Zheng staggered backward several steps, his ears ringing. The world before him darkening. And then his whole body collapsed heavily onto the battle stage, completely unconscious. At that instant, every cheer vanished. The entire training ground fell into a silence so deep it almost did not feel real. The faces that had just been excited, just shouting encouragement, all stiffened in place. No one reacted in time, no one could say a word. Only Fang Yuan remained standing there. At that moment, both his fists were also mangled beyond recognition, blood pouring without stop, even the pale white bones of his fingers exposed. In other words, those two punches had not only knocked Fang Zheng down, Fang Yuan himself had paid a very heavy price as well. But what chilled people more than the wounds was not the injury itself, but the way he looked after all of it. Standing straight in the winter wind, blood dripping down in drops. Hair stirring lightly in the cold breeze. Yet his expression remained just as calm as before. As though the one badly injured was not him at all. Then he slowly swept his gaze around. He looked toward the students who had only just been shouting against him in unison. Toward the Gu masters standing and watching. And toward the tent where the clan leader and the elders were still frozen in shock. In the end, he only said one sentence lightly, "Sorry to disappoint you." On the stage, Fang Zheng had already fainted. Fang Yuan still stood there, his face as cold as ever, almost not revealing any emotion at all. The only difference was that now, no one across the whole arena could keep calm anymore. Some people clutched their heads, unable to believe what had just happened. Others stared fixedly at Fang Yuan's blood-soaked fists, unable even to finish a sentence. Because everyone had seen it very clearly, he had not used any defensive Gu worm, nor had he circled around any weak point at all. He had chosen the most direct method, and also the one hardest for others to accept. He had used his own two hands to smash apart the defense of Jade Skin Gu. And what made people shiver most was not necessarily how strong those punches had been, but that he had known perfectly well the price he would have to pay and still done it. To strike against that defensive layer meant his hands would naturally break first. Yet he still drove the punches down without hesitation, without trembling. As though from beginning to end, he had already calculated even his own injuries into the outcome of this match. The Academy Elder could no longer remain seated. He jumped directly onto the stage, first checking Fang Zheng's condition. Only after confirming that he had suffered a serious concussion and had only temporarily fainted, rather than being in mortal danger, did he finally relax slightly. But when he turned and took hold of Fang Yuan's hands, even he could not help being shaken. Those two hands had almost lost their original shape entirely. Flesh and blood mangled together, white bone exposed. Even clear cracks visible on the finger bones themselves. This was no longer the kind of ordinary injury one saw in a school match. It was the true price of those two punches. The Academy Elder immediately began healing him. A gentle moonlight descended, spreading over the injured hands. The bones began closing together. Flesh also slowly knit itself back in place. From the outside, the result looked extremely obvious. But during this process, he also quietly did something else, taking the chance to probe Fang Yuan's aperture and whole body. He saw very clearly the dark green bronze primeval sea. He saw the liquor worms swimming within it. He saw that Fang Yuan's cultivation truly was rank 1 peak stage. He also saw Moonlight Gu and Little Light Gu hidden in his palms. But beyond those things, there was nothing else. And it was precisely this point that left the Academy Elder even more confused. If there was no other Gu worm supporting him, then where exactly had the strength Fang Yuan just displayed come from? A 15-year-old youth. Even if stronger than average, should still not have been strong enough to smash apart the defense of Jade Skin Gu with his bare hands. Of course, what he could not see were the cards Fang Yuan had already hidden away beforehand. White Boar Gu and Jade Skin Gu were both not on his body at this moment. And Spring-Autumn Cicada was even less the sort of thing an Academy Elder could easily detect. So in the end, the result of the inspection still left only a blank filled with suspicion. And it was precisely that blank that caused the people below to begin coming up with explanations of their own. Some said he was a natural monster like Kai Shan, possessing strength far beyond ordinary people since childhood. Some brought up how he had composed poems since he was small, saying that though heaven had not given him A-grade aptitude, it had compensated him elsewhere. There were also those who refused to be impressed, saying that even if he was a bit stronger, it would only go so far in the long run. A Gu master still had to be judged by aptitude. But in truth, those kinds of explanations were exactly what Fang Yuan wanted. As long as everyone remained busy explaining things to one another, then their real attention would not fall directly onto his secret. In the end, the Academy elder withdrew his hand and asked not a single further question. Right before everyone's eyes, he announced that Fang Yuan had taken first place in this year's year-end examination. The moment that news fell, the entire training ground once again burst into uproar. A person with C-grade aptitude had actually defeated Fang Zheng at rank 2 and seized first place. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, likely no one would have dared believe it. But what clan leader Gu Yue Jiao cared about most was not actually who had taken first place. A year-end examination, however impressive, was still a small matter in his eyes. What truly worried him was Fang Zheng. Because this defeat was not the ordinary kind. If Fang Zheng had been completely crushed from the start, then perhaps the shock would not have been so great, but instead, he had just risen from the bottom, just received the support of the whole arena, just made everyone believe he was about to turn the battle around, only to be knocked down on the spot by Fang Yuan's 2 punches. A fall like that was not only a fall on the battle stage. It could very easily drag down all the confidence the clan leader had worked so hard to build up in him during this period. Because of that, in his heart, Gu Yue Jiao even felt a trace of irritation toward Fang Yuan. If he had simply lost here, everything would have looked much better. But instead he had to win in exactly this way, win so completely that no one was given time to prepare themselves for it. As for the elders at his side, all kinds of thoughts were surfacing in their minds as well. Some suspected Fang Yuan was a natural monster from birth. Some still believed there was a mysterious person secretly helping him from behind. And the old question once again surfaced in everyone's head: who exactly was the person standing behind Fang Yuan? But no one spoke the thought aloud. Because after a brief silence, Gu Yue Jiao suddenly smiled, right there on the spot. He announced that beyond the usual reward of 100 primeval stones and priority in choosing a Gu worm for first place, he wished to reward Fang Yuan with something else. Special permission to choose any team in the clan to join. As long as he opened his mouth, that team would have to accept him. The moment those words were spoken, the students below and even the rank 2 Gu masters standing around could not hide the envy in their eyes. Because this was no longer an ordinary reward, it was almost like a door being opened directly toward the best teams in the clan. Future prospects, resources, position, all of it could be changed by the answer that came next. But for Fang Yuan, this was not some unexpected joy. It was trouble arriving at his doorstep. Almost the instant he heard it, Fang Yuan understood the intention behind it. The 3 strongest teams of the clan were all present there. King Shu's team representing the clan leader's faction, Kai Shan's team representing the Kai family, and Mo Yan's team representing the Mo family. To an ordinary student, being allowed to choose freely among those 3 was almost too good an opportunity. Joining one of them meant a powerful backing, better resources, and a much brighter road ahead. But for Fang Yuan, the situation was exactly the opposite. Because in the eyes of the clan's upper ranks, he was already marked with a giant question. There might very well be some mysterious force secretly backing him from the shadows. So if he now casually joined one of those 3 great teams, the consequences would be anything but simple. If he chose Kai Shan's team, for example, the Kai family would immediately think, "We never took the initiative to invite Fang Yuan, so why is he coming in here? Is he trying to plant someone? Is he here to investigate something?" And right after that, the suspicion would no longer stop with him alone. It would pull in the idea that the other factions might think the Kai family had secretly recruited him long ago, breaking the clan's unspoken balance. At that point, Fang Yuan himself would become the excuse by which the 3 factions began investigating one another in reverse. The problem was that Fang Yuan had no backing at all. If he were truly dragged into such a chain of mutual suspicion, then things would only become more and more troublesome for him. So from the very beginning, his best choice had actually been some more ordinary team, one less watched, like Jiang He's team. Unfortunately, in the current situation, even that option was no longer suitable. Because now he stood right beneath the gaze of the entire upper hierarchy of the clan. One wrong step would immediately pull him into another person's chessboard. And just as he was still weighing it, clan leader Gu Yue applied even more pressure. With a faint smile, he said directly that if Fang Yuan did not choose, then he himself would appoint one for him. Hearing this, Fang Yuan understood even more clearly. This was no longer merely a reward. It was a very refined way of forcing someone's hand. If the clan leader personally appointed him, then he would very likely be pushed into Kai Shan's team or Mo Yan's team. In doing so, the clan leader could at once clear suspicion away from his own side. Conveniently throw this bundle of trouble onto a rival faction. And at the same time, gain another chance to draw out just who the mysterious force behind Fang Yuan actually was. A move that looked gentle on the surface, but was in truth very hidden and very much in line with the style of someone long accustomed to managing internal clan struggles. Fang Yuan understood that he absolutely could not allow that to happen. And exactly at that moment, another voice suddenly rang out from the crowd. Someone took the initiative to invite him into his team. That person was Gu Yue Jiao San. A name that did not stand out much. A team that did not possess any notable background either. The moment he stepped forward, from the clan leader to the elders, none of them could hide their disappointment. Because if Fang Yuan entered some mixed, insignificant team like that, then almost the entire intended test of the day would be ruined. As for Fang Yuan, that invitation was nothing less than a path of escape arriving at the perfect time. He did not know Jiao San. In his memories, he had not paid much attention to this person either. So naturally, suspicion arose in his heart. Why would someone with no past connection to him take the initiative to invite him? Was it really just because he had taken first place? Of course, it could not be so simple. But no matter what hidden meaning it might contain, at the very least, in the current situation, it was still the best possible option for diffusing the pressure of being forced to choose right in front of everyone. So Fang Yuan answered at once. He would join Jiao San's team. At once, another wave of discussion rose across the grounds. Some thought him stupid. Some could not understand why, after passing up the strong teams, he would choose some mixed, unremarkable one instead. Even the clan's upper ranks could not help but let their expressions darken. But for Fang Yuan, that reaction was precisely correct. Because he knew that what he needed at this moment was not the kind of bright future other people saw, but to stay as far away from the center of suspicion as possible. And yet this still did not mean the matter was truly over. Because though outwardly it looked like an unknown little team had stepped in to break the situation, in the eyes of the clan's upper ranks, that only made Gu Yue Jiao San into a name even more worth investigating carefully. If Jiao San had merely spoken up by coincidence, that was one thing. But if he too was another piece on the board, then the matter became even more interesting. 3 days later, snow blanketed King Mao Mountain white. Amid that freezing scenery, Fang Yuan officially left the academy and entered the ranks of true Gu masters. This time he was no longer wearing student robes. Instead, he wore the dark blue martial uniform of a Gu master. Bamboo leggings bound around his calves, pointed bamboo shoes on his feet, and a broad belt at his waist inset with a copper plate engraved with the character 1. That outfit alone marked one thing very clearly. From today onward, he was no longer a student, but a true rank 1 Gu master. Someone who had stepped out from the ranks of mortals, and now possessed the to accept clan missions, and live inside the clan's system with a completely different identity from before. And on this very first mission, Jiao San was quietly observing him the whole time. On the surface, he smiled gently, spoke mildly, and even took the initiative to tell him not to be nervous, that he could simply take his time adapting to the mission, which on the face of it made him seem just like a team leader who knew how to care for newcomers. But to Fang Yuan, that smile only made him more wary, because it reminded him of a story from the legends of Renzu. Attitude Gu had once said, "Attitude is the mask of the heart. Only those with a mind to hide things can wear that mask." In other words, a warm, friendly attitude was not necessarily real at all. It might merely be a layer worn to conceal what one was truly thinking inside. So while Jiao San was observing him, Fang Yuan had already quietly begun observing Jiao San in return. Amid the white snowfields, the five-man team ran swiftly across the mountain slope. The winter wind lashed across their faces like knife blades. Their footprints pressed deep into the snow, one set following another. On the surface, Jiao San still wore the same familiar, gentle smile. He even took the initiative to tell Fang Yuan that if he grew tired, he only had to say so after all. This was his first time carrying out a mission. And the team would naturally look after a newcomer. It sounded very warm. But the others in the team all understood perfectly well that it was only talk. Because the day was still early, there was absolutely no need to push the pace that hard at all. To put it plainly, Jiao San was merely using that rapid run over the snow as a way to establish his authority over the newcomer. This sort of thing was in fact not unusual. Within teams, new people were often tested like that. First, to see what they were capable of. Second, to grind down their edge so they would be easier to manage later. The other three all saw through it, yet none of them said so aloud. Because to them, that kind of thing had already become routine. It was only that this time, the outcome was not at all what Jiao San had expected. Running over snow was no simple matter. Underneath the snow there might be sharp rocks, deep pits, even hidden hunting traps. If a newcomer was not used to it, the slightest carelessness would send him sprawling. But along the entire stretch, Fang Yuan did not slow down once, nor did he stumble even a single time. At times he took short steps, at times long leaps, sometimes climbing upward, sometimes slipping sideways. Every movement was stable and clean, and from beginning to end he remained very close behind Jiao San. After they arrived, even Jiao San had to turn and look at him, smiling as he offered a word of praise. But that was only the beginnings. Because after stopping, the other three team members arrived only one after another. Each was panting hard, face red from exertion. One had to brace both hands on his knees. Another even sat directly down on the snow. Jiao San immediately turned and scolded them, conveniently using Fang Yuan as the point of comparison. To say it plainly, the attempt to establish authority over the newcomer had in the end turned into a scene where the older members were the ones being lectured right. In front of him, from then on, the way those three looked toward Fang Yuan changed. One found him strange, one was displeased. And one had already begun to feel secretly unconvinced. Because the original plan had been to see him embarrassed. But in the end, it was they who were turned into the example. Right afterward, the team began the real mission. The target this time was to gather frozen rotten mud from a mountain valley. The task sounded simple, but it was quite time-consuming. To do it properly, one first had to distinguish this special soil from ordinary frozen earth, and that was not something easy for a newcomer. Kong Jing in the team stepped forward and took the tools out of Big Belly Toad, a logistics-type goo worm specialized for storing objects. Shovel after shovel, wooden box after wooden box were spat out. Enough for all five of them to divide up and carry as they scattered in different directions to gather the mud. The other three watched Fang Yuan head off alone in a separate direction and all laughed inwardly. In their thinking, for this sort of work, a newcomer could almost only depend on luck. Without experience, it was very easy to dig up ordinary dirt by mistake and waste effort for nothing. So in their eyes, the more hurried Fang Yuan was, the easier it would be for him to make mistakes. But exactly 1 hour later, when he returned, all four of them froze. Fang Yuan's wooden box was packed full, not half full, not filled with a mixture. Almost entirely genuine frozen rotten mud. Meanwhile, even if the others pooled their results together, they still had not gathered as much as he had. One of them could not restrain himself and asked at once, how did he know which places contained this kind of soil? Fang Yuan only answered very calmly. He repeated the theory they had once learned in the academy. Frozen rotten mud was originally formed where marshy mud had later frozen over. Its color carried a faint purple within black. Its smell was originally foul, but because it was frozen, the stench was hard to catch. And it was often used as fertilizer because it served as food for stench fart fat worms. After saying that, he even casually pointed out his own guess as well. This mission was very likely about collecting that soil to fertilize the moon orchid flowers in the Clan's underground caverns. Hearing that, the whole team stood stunned. Because everyone at the academy had once been taught those theories. But learning them was one thing, matching them to real terrain was something else entirely. In other words, through a simple mission alone, Fang Yuan had already made one thing very clear to them. He not only remembered the theory, he also knew how to use it. At that point, Jiao San still smiled and praised him. But the smile had become noticeably stiffer. Because the first attempt to establish dominance had failed. The second attempt to make things difficult had also failed. On the contrary, it had only made the newcomer stand out even more in front of the whole team. By evening, the group returned to the Internal Affairs Hall to submit the mission. The total reward was 6 primeval stones. Jiao San kept 2 for himself. The remaining 4 team members each got 1. The other 3 were quite happy after receiving theirs. After all, earning primeval stones like this was not easy. Only Fang Yuan remained completely calm. Outwardly he said nothing, but inwardly he had already seen the whole pattern very clearly. The forced sprint over the snow was a show of dominance. Splitting them up for the collection was a deliberate attempt to make things difficult. And the final way the primeval stones were divided was simply another quiet form of suppression. Because by rights, the reason the reward for this mission had been increased was precisely because a newcomer had joined the team. Put simply, that extra portion should originally have been used to support the newcomer during the early stage. But Jiao San split everything cleanly and evenly, as though no such matter had ever existed. On the surface, there was nothing wrong with that approach. But the meaning beneath it was very clear. And it was exactly at that point that a question of real importance arose in Fang Yuan's mind. He and Jiao San had never known each other before. So why was this man suppressing him again and again from the very first mission? Was it simply because he wanted to establish authority over a newcomer? Or was there another reason hidden behind it all, standing by the main road? Jiao San still wore a warm smile, acting as though he were patiently explaining to Fang Yuan the rules of carrying out missions. Each month, a Gu master had to complete at least 1 mission. Missions were received from the Internal Affairs Hall or the External Affairs Hall, and once accepted, they had to be finished. Rank 2 Gu masters could request an exemption under special circumstances, but rank 1 Gu masters had no such right. And this so-called clan evaluation was directly tied to each Gu master's future prospects. On the surface, those words were not wrong. But the moment Fang Yuan heard them, he understood that Jiao San was only telling half the truth. He was deliberately emphasizing evaluation, emphasizing future prospects, emphasizing the idea that newcomers had to rely on the team leader. Put nicely, it sounded like guidance. Put bluntly, he was already beginning to apply pressure. Then Jiao San continued arranging Fang Yuan's next mission. This time it was hunting wild deer, not especially dangerous. Outwardly, Jiao San still kept a caring expression, saying that this was a very suitable mission for a newcomer like Fang Yuan to get used to things. Immediately, the other team members began chiming in one after another. One said the team leader had already shown him a great deal of care. Another said that verbal thanks were not enough, and that he might as well treat the whole team to a meal. Yet another hinted that in the outside world, relationships were extremely important. And if he wanted things to go smoothly, he needed to learn how to flatter the right person, especially the team leader. By that point, their intention was already completely obvious. They wanted to bleed him for money, not by robbing him directly, but by using words like relationships, rules, evaluation, and taking care of the newcomer to pressure him into willingly taking out his own primeval stones. If it had been some ordinary teenager fresh out of the academy, still simple-minded, it would have been very easy to get dizzy in this sort of situation. After hearing a few words, he might have thought it all sounded reasonable, then started feeling that he ought to show some tact and take the initiative to spend stones currying favor with the team leader. Unfortunately for them, the person they had met was Fang Yuan. In the eyes of these ordinary Gu masters, so-called clan evaluation was something of enormous importance. But in Fang Yuan's eyes, it was hardly worth bothering over. Because from very early on, he had never planned to spend his whole life inside this clan's system. His goal had always been to become stronger as quickly as possible. reach rank 3 as fast as he could, and then find an opportunity to leave this place. If that was the case, then whether his evaluation was good or bad truly mattered less to him than a single real primeval stone in hand. So from beginning to end, his gaze remained extremely calm. He was not intimidated, not touched, not drawn in. When the others had nearly finished saying enough, he simply replied in a flat tone. He still had things to do, so he would be leaving first. That one sentence alone made all 4 of them freeze, because they genuinely had not expected that after saying so much. After performing their blackface and whiteface routines so thoroughly, the person standing before them would still act as though not a single word had gotten through to him. Their entire little performance suddenly looked like a complete joke. Even Jiao San almost failed to keep smiling, but in the end, he still forced himself to swallow the anger and kept up the appearance of friendliness while taking the initiative to follow after Fang Yuan. This time he changed methods. He said he would go with Fang Yuan to rent a room, saying that he knew the places around the mountain stronghold fairly well, understood the local situation, and could help him choose somewhere suitable. On the surface, it sounded like another favor. But in Fang Yuan's heart, he already understood very clearly, this definitely was not as simple as it appeared, sure enough. Throughout the whole afternoon after that, every place Jiao San's group took him to view was either too expensive, inconveniently located, or had such terrible conditions that living there for long would inevitably cause trouble. One person recommended a room near the clan leader's pavilion with a sky-high price. Another suggested a damp basement room, cold and likely to cause illness. Outwardly, everyone sounded as though they sincerely wanted to help. But in every sentence, in every place they proposed, there was not the slightest trace of goodwill. At this point, Fang Yuan also saw things very clearly. This group not only wanted to force him to spend money, they also wanted to use the opportunity to guide him into a disadvantageous situation. He did not even accept the apparently reasonable suggestion of living together to reduce rent, because the thing he needed most was always solitude. The moment he had to share a place with someone else, too many of his later secrets would no longer be safe. So from beginning to end, he only silently observed, neither hastily rejecting everything nor casually agreeing to anything. He listened patiently, watched patiently, waited patiently to see whether there was some other trap hidden behind all this so-called help. And then, at exactly that moment, the person truly standing behind the whole matter finally appeared. Nanny Shen came to find him. She said that his uncle and aunt had prepared wine and food at home and were deliberately inviting him back, saying that home was still better in the end. So why bother renting a room outside? The moment he heard that, Fang Yuan understood everything immediately. At last, the hand secretly pulling the strings from behind had shown itself, his uncle and aunt. For Nanny Shen to appear at exactly the right moment, someone had clearly passed word behind the scenes. And the people with the strongest motive and who most wanted him to go back were precisely those two. In other words, the whole helping him rent a room business had likely been a complete setup from start to finish. Pressure him until renting outside seemed troublesome and expensive. Pressure him until living alone seemed difficult. Then, at the right moment, push out what looked like the most convenient road, returning to his uncle and aunt's house. In his uncle and aunt's eyes, the most important matter now was no longer saving face, but holding onto the inheritance. Because Fang Yuan was already 16. The moment he met the conditions to move out on his own, he would gain the right to demand the share of property his parents had left behind. And that wealth had long since been held in his uncle and aunt's hands, with records clearly kept in the Internal Affairs Hall. Denying it would be impossible. So they had already prepared their countermeasures. On the surface, they pretended to invite him home, wanting first to hold him tightly under their control and then gradually find a way to push him out. But when they saw Fang Yuan refuse decisively, not even stepping over the threshold, they too understood that that plan was no longer useful. In truth, splitting up the household in this clan was not simple at all. To reclaim one's inheritance, one had to pass through 2 steps. The first step was that the Gu master himself had to meet the conditions, and also had to be free of any mission assignment. Only then could he go to the Internal Affairs Hall and request permission. The second step was that after the request succeeded, he still had to complete the inheritance mission assigned by the Internal Affairs Hall. Only then would he truly have the right to claim the share of property that belonged to him. And precisely here, his uncle and aunt had already arranged someone to block his way. That person was Jiao San. If Fang Yuan remained inside Jiao San's team, then all Jiao San had to do was keep accepting one new mission after another. And Fang Yuan would never have any free gap in which to go request the household split. One mission after another, endlessly dragging things out. And if he could not get through the first step, then naturally there was no need even to speak of the second. At this point, Fang Yuan understood the whole thing clearly. He was not being pressured for no reason. Nor was it simply a case of an old team bullying a newcomer. From the very beginning, he had been placed inside an invisible noose. Every step he took was being deliberately slowed so that he could never reach that inheritance. Naturally, once he thought it through this far, the first thing he considered was still how to solve it. The most direct method and theoretically the simplest one was to kill people. Kill Jiao San, kill his uncle and aunt too. Then there would no longer be anyone competing with him for the inheritance. But that thought had only just appeared when he discarded it himself. Because the method was too dangerous. Never mind his uncle and Aunt Jiao San alone was already a rank 2 Gu master. And Fang Yuan right now was still only rank 1 peak stage. Killing him would already be difficult. After killing him, the punishment hall would certainly investigate to the bitter end. And once the investigation went too deep, his own secrets, including everything about the flower wine traveler, might all be dragged into the light. Put simply, creating a huge problem 100 times greater just to solve one smaller one was completely not worth it. If he wanted to truly make a move, he needed an extremely suitable opportunity. One where he could go with the flow, deal with everything cleanly, and not leave behind consequences too large to handle. That time had not yet arrived. So that night, beneath the moon on the snowy road, Fang Yuan only continued walking silently forward. Cold wind. Bamboo buildings on both sides covered in snow. The air so clean that drawing it in made the mind feel instantly clearer. And in his head, all the scattered clues were gradually becoming more and more distinct. Then he stopped before an old, dilapidated bamboo building. The structure was ragged and crooked, like an old man on the verge of no longer surviving the winter. But the moment Fang Yuan saw it, something stirred slightly inside him. Because this was exactly where he had once lived in his previous life. Back then, after his uncle and aunt drove him out, he had had less than 15 primeval stones left in hand. He had wandered the streets for several days before finally finding this place. The room was old, the conditions were poor. But it had one very important point. At the very least in his memories, this place had no traps. And right now, that alone was already precious enough. Half a watch later, he had rented the room and gone up to the second floor. The room was small and old, containing only a bed, a ragged blanket, and an oil lamp. The wooden floor creaked underfoot as though it might give way at any moment. But for Fang Yuan, that was enough. The instant the landlord left, he sat cross-legged on the bed and began cultivating. Inside his aperture, dark green primeval essence surged up in waves. It repeatedly crashed against the white crystal membrane that was the barrier between rank 1 peak stage and rank 2. Wave after wave slammed into it. Cracks began appearing across the aperture wall. Some of them split deeper and deeper. But when the primeval essence ran dry and could no longer continue striking, those cracks gradually began closing again. Almost all of the effort from before was reduced nearly to nothing. And it was at exactly this moment that Fang Yuan saw another thing even more clearly. To break Jiao San's blockade, there was actually a simpler method than killing people. He could directly break through to rank 2. Because rank 1 Gu Masters had no right to skip missions. But rank 2 Gu Masters had one exemption per year. The moment he reached rank 2, he could immediately drop his current mission and go apply for the household split. It sounded simple enough. But the problem lay here. With C-grade aptitude, this was not easy for him to accomplish. To shatter that crystal membrane, he needed a sufficiently violent burst in a short period of time. But the maximum amount of primeval essence his aptitude allowed was only 44%. while successfully breaking the aperture usually required at least around 55% dark green primeval essence. The difference did not sound especially large. But at the moment of breakthrough, it was a very clear line between just slightly short and completely impossible. That was also why people always said that in Gu Master Cultivation, aptitude mattered so much. After trying once and still failing to completely break through the crystal wall, Fang Yuan withdrew his consciousness, climbed down from the bed and went over to the window. By then the oil lamp had already gone out. The whole room was steeped in darkness. Only moonlight and reflected snowlight from outside filtered in, making the world beyond the window look like a palace of ice and jade. Clean enough that it seemed without a speck of dust. Cold wind blew against his face. And standing before that scene, the youth only gave a faint smile, no impatience, no discouragement. And no wavering because of it. Because to him, this was still only another layer of frost and hardship on the road ahead. And then in that cold, snowy night, Fang Yuan only spoke one sentence softly. It is nothing more than a bit of wind and frost. Right after moving into the rented room for the first night, Fang Yuan almost did not rest at all. As soon as the sky began to brighten, he went out and bought in one sweep all the most necessary things for long-term living in that shabby room. The old bedding had to be replaced. If one oil lamp was not enough, then more had to be bought. Table, chairs, heater, dried provisions, drinking water, whatever was needed, he prepared in advance. Because he understood very clearly that some things simply could not be skimped on. If even one's living place could not be properly maintained, then by the time winter dragged on a little while longer, one might fall ill before ever growing stronger. On the other side, at the agreed hour by the north gate of the mountain stronghold, Jiao San and the 4 team members had already waited until they were growing impatient. At first they still thought Fang Yuan was only a little late. Then a quarter of an hour passed, then half an hour. There was still no sign of him. At that point, even Jiao San began feeling that something was wrong. Because the thing he feared most was not Fang Yuan skipping the mission. It was something far more dangerous. Fang Yuan might have already seen through their intentions and sealed himself away somewhere, putting his full strength into attacking rank 2. The moment he really crossed that threshold, the whole situation would change completely. Because a rank 2 Gu Master had the right to skip one mission each year. If Fang Yuan reached rank 2, he could directly abandon the mission in Jiao San's team, and then go to the Internal Affairs Hall to request the household split. In other words, the whole arrangement made to keep him away from the inheritance would be broken open instantly. Precisely because of that, Jiao San's expression grew uglier and uglier. He immediately split the others up to search every inn, search every lodging house. They had to drag Fang Yuan out before he truly stepped into rank 2. Meanwhile, in that old tattered room on the second floor, Fang Yuan was already sitting cross-legged on the bed. Before him lay several opened bags of primeval stones. Their number was no longer large. And that was the real issue weighing on him heavily. Back when he had still been in the academy, the number of primeval stones in his hand had once exceeded 1,000, but feeding Gu worms. Cultivating, using the liquor worm to refine essence, nurturing the aperture. Increasing strength with white boar Gu, all of it was a bottomless pit that devoured money. By now he possessed more than 7 Gu worms. Merely feeding that many was already an enormous burden. If he continued spending the way he was now, the primeval stones left in hand would at most last 2 more months, so he needed the inheritance. And to reclaim the inheritance, he first had to step into rank 2. But the difficulty lay exactly there. His C-grade aptitude allowed his primeval C to hold at most 44% primeval essence. Yet to break through the aperture wall and enter rank 2 usually required at least around 55% dark green primeval essence. That shortfall could not be bridged by effort alone. If his aptitude were better, the matter would not be too difficult. If he had a master to help him, there would still be other methods. If he found a Gu worm that could improve aptitude, then it would be even less worrying. But for Fang Yuan right now, none of those paths were available for the time being. So there was only one method left to him, stupid but practical. Use primeval stones to force the breakthrough. Put simply, while attacking the aperture wall, he would continuously absorb primeval essence from primeval stones and pour it into the process. Rather than trying to explode through in one instant, he would rely on grinding it down bit by bit, preventing the cracks in the aperture wall from fully closing again. This method was very slow, extremely wasteful of primeval stones, and also exhausting beyond measure. Once begun, it was almost impossible to stop. The moment it paused for too long, the cracks would recover, and all the effort before it would be washed away entirely. And he did not have enough primeval stones to try over and over again many times. So Fang Yuan sat on the bed and began attacking his aperture in exactly that way. Dark green primeval essence surged in waves, crashing continuously against the crystal wall. At the same time, natural primeval essence from the primeval stones was continuously drawn in to replace what he lost. The progress was extremely slow, but at least it was still moving forward. On one side, he was in seclusion in the room. On the other, Jiao San was like a man sitting on burning coals. Only by noon of the second day did they finally trace where he was staying. The moment he heard confirmation, Jiao San let out a cold laugh. He no longer hid his intent at all. There was only one goal: he had to ruin this attempt at secluded cultivation. The entire group immediately rushed over. Outside the door was pasted a bamboo sheet. On it was Fang Yuan's handwriting, stating very clearly that he was going into seclusion for several days to devote himself fully to attacking rank 2, and asking not to be disturbed. If Jiao San saw it, then he could treat it as a leave request. Jiao San read it, only snorted coldly and threw the sheet away. Then he immediately began acting his part smoothly. Outwardly he called loudly, asking with apparent concern, saying that the whole team was worried about him, afraid he might encounter danger while attacking rank 2. On the surface, every word sounded sincerely caring. But anyone with even a little understanding could easily see that he was only looking for a legitimate excuse to break down the door. There was no answer from inside. Jiao San called again. His voice grew louder and louder. His concern sounded more and more dramatic. At last he drew the conclusion himself. Fang Yuan had very likely already run into danger inside, and there was no choice now but to break in and save him. Kong Jing immediately cooperated with him. A few sentences were tossed back and forth before the excuse to break down the door was considered complete enough. And the very next moment, one heavy kick came crashing in. The entire door burst open, flying straight inside and slamming hard against the old bed. But the moment they forced their way in, all of them froze. There was no one in the room. The bed was empty, the room was cold and still. There was not the slightest trace of Fang Yuan at all. All the concern they had just performed, all the little drama they had acted out at the door, instantly became a joke. Jiao San stood frozen for a moment, both embarrassed and furious. Kong Jing could not help blurting out his doubt. If Fang Yuan was not here, then why had he still posted a leave notice outside the door? If they wanted the answer, there was only one thing left to do: call the landlord over. But the landlord, the moment he came up, was in no mood to be polite. First, he directly demanded compensation for the broken door, forcing Jiao San to pay. Even though rage was boiling inside him, Jiao San could only suppress it, take out primeval stones and pay. Even adding a little more on top just to smooth things over. Only then did the landlord explain clearly. Fang Yuan had indeed rented this room. He had indeed intended to stay for a long time. He had bought new bedding, bought tables and chairs, prepared a heater. He had even asked where he could buy coal cheaply. The landlord told him there was no need to buy any east of the mountain stronghold. There was an open coal pit where he could dig it himself. After that, Fang Yuan had left and never returned. Hearing that, Jiao San inwardly relaxed a little. At least on the surface, it sounded fairly reasonable. A person newly renting a room, intending to stay long-term and wanting to save primeval stones, going out to dig his own coal was not strange. If that really was the case, then perhaps Fang Yuan had only been delayed somewhere outside, but another whole day passed, still no sign of him. By the third day, even Kong Jing was beginning to grow suspicious. It was only digging coal, how could it take this long? Had he perhaps run into some sort of accident on the way? After hearing that, Jiao San instead became more convinced that this was very likely the case. Because recently, wolf dens had spread wider and wider, and wild beasts had begun appearing more and more often around the mountain stronghold. If Fang Yuan had really gone outside alone for that long, then running into trouble was by no means impossible. And once they thought of it like that, a very different feeling arose in their hearts. Some of them even began laughing and joking about it. Because if Fang Yuan had really run into trouble in the wild, then would that not save them the trouble of teaching him a lesson? Yet just when Jiao San had begun believing that things had already drifted toward another direction entirely, in a place none of them would ever have guessed, Fang Yuan was still in seclusion. For 4 days and 4 nights he almost never stopped. Wave after wave of dark green primeval essence continuously crashed against the crystal aperture wall. Day by day, the cracks spreading across that membrane grew denser and denser. His primeval C also slowly fell, from 44% down to only a bit over 10%. And finally, he reached the limits. A cracking sound rang out within his aperture. The rank 1 crystal membrane collapsed entirely. Its fragments dissolved into the primeval sea, and then a new membrane of light rose up in its place. At the same time, from the deepest part of the primeval sea, pale red iron primeval essence began to form. Fang Yuan had finally crossed that threshold. This success had not come lightly. 4 days and 4 nights of uninterrupted strain controlling primeval essence, maintaining the cracks, absorbing stones. Never allowing a pause had pushed both his mind and his body almost to their limit. By the time he opened his eyes, he was left with barely enough willpower to pull a blanket over himself and collapse into sleep. That one sleep lasted straight until the following afternoon, when he woke. His mind had recovered by more than half. But his body still felt exhausted all over, as though he had just gone through an enormous draining battle. And at this moment, the first person who appeared outside the door was not Jiao San, it was Jiang He. The moment Jiang He saw Fang Yuan come out, tired but safe, he truly let out a breath of relief. If Fang Yuan had continued never showing himself, then Jiang He himself would also have been dragged into serious trouble. Because this attempt at seclusion had never actually taken place in that rented room at all. Fang Yuan had secretly left beforehand, gone straight down to the village below the mountain, and borrowed Jiang He's place as a hiding spot. That had been his true move. The rented room in the mountain stronghold was only bait. The leave notice outside the door. The matter of asking where to buy coal, all of it had only been smoke to lead Jiao San's attention in the wrong direction. The place where he had actually attacked rank 2 had been Jiang He's house. And it was exactly that move that ensured his seclusion would not be disturbed. Because between him and Jiang He there already existed a shared secret from the incident involving old man Wang's family. If that secret were to stay hidden, then Jiang He, of all people, needed Fang Yuan to stay alive and well. Put simply, if Fang Yuan died in his place, then once the punishment hall investigated downward, the old secret might also be dragged out. So in the current situation, Jiang He not only had no motive to harm him, but had instead unconsciously become a fairly safe shield. And it was precisely because of that once he noticed the aura on Fang Yuan had changed, Jiang He was truly shocked. Even he had not expected that someone as new as Fang Yuan could break through to rank 2 successfully in a single attempt. From that moment on, Jiang He's attitude became even more amiable. Not only did he keep him there for a hearty meal, but before sending him off, he deliberately reminded him that recently wild beasts had been appearing more often around the mountain stronghold, and that it would be safest to stay one more night, but Fang Yuan still refused. He had to go back. Because after this breakthrough, he was no longer a rank 1 tied down by Jiao San. From now on, he had the right to skip 1 mission every year. And that also meant that the rope his uncle Aunt and Jiao San had spent so long trying to tighten around his legs had now been cut through by his own hands. That winter afternoon, snow began falling again. White flakes settled slowly over his shoulders, over his hair, over the road leading from the village up the mountain. In the distance, Gu Yue Mountain stronghold stood silently on the mountainside, beneath the fading light of evening. On the way back to the mountain stronghold, Fang Yuan had not even had time to rest before he already sensed that something in the atmosphere around him was very unusual. In the short stretch of road of less than 500 meters, he ran into more than 10 small teams hurrying outward one after another. Every one of them was in a rush, calling to each other to keep close to the formation as they moved. Just seeing that was enough to know something serious must have happened ahead. At first, Fang Yuan did not immediately remember what it was. 500 years of memories were too long. Many things from the early stage of his life in the mountain stronghold had long since become blurred. Not to mention that since his rebirth, he had already changed too many things, so many events might already have drifted away from their old track. Because of that, when faced with what was happening before his eyes, he could not immediately tell whether it belonged to old memories or to a new upheaval caused by himself. Only when he neared the north gate of the stronghold did he run into someone familiar, Kai Cheng. The moment Kai Cheng saw Fang Yuan walking alone, he could not resist speaking up in a lofty tone. According to him, around the villages at the foot of the mountain, a small beast tide was forming. If left alone, it would spread into a much larger beast tide. At that point, not only would the villages be destroyed, but even the mountain stronghold would be affected. Because although the clan regarded mortals as the lowest stratum, those villagers were still laborers and an essential source of supplies that the stronghold could not afford to lose entirely. Hearing that, the thoughts in Fang Yuan's mind gradually connected again. This world had always been like this. Wild beasts and humans struggled over living space, over resources. When wolf packs expanded, they drove other beast herds out of their territory. Those displaced herds then crashed into the territory of yet other herds. And so the layered effects piled up until in the end, a beast tide took shape. And when he thought that far, another idea suddenly flashed through his mind. This could be trouble. But at the same time, it could also be an opportunity. Naturally, he did not reveal anything of that outwardly. Because right in front of him, Kai Cheng was still smugly showing off that he had already advanced to rank 2. Deliberately stressing the difference between the two of them. Then casually mocking him by saying that in a beast tide at night like this, a tiny rank 1 Gu master like Fang Yuan had best know his place and be careful. But this time, Fang Yuan did not pay any attention to that sort of provocation. He only responded very calmly that if the clan had already issued an emergency order and he was separated from his team, then according to the rules he could completely merge with the nearest team, continue fighting, and only afterward find his way back to his own group. That statement immediately left Kai Cheng speechless. Because it was indeed clan policy. In an emergency, a separated Gu master could join the nearest team and continue carrying out the mission, and no one had the right to obstruct that. The one who spoke up to confirm it was none other than Kai Shan. Compared with Kai Cheng, Kai Shan was obviously a completely different sort of person. He did not speak much, he did not show off. He only glanced at Fang Yuan once and then gave a crisp order, "If you want to come along, keep up." And so the 6-man group immediately set off, following the mountain path straight down toward the foot of the mountain. Along the way, the bearing of Kai Shan's team quickly revealed itself. This truly was one of the 3 strongest groups in the clan. Every person kept their breathing steady, their steps decisive, their speed swift without becoming disordered. Even while running at night over snow-covered paths, their formation remained extremely solid. Only Kai Cheng was a little strained. From time to time, he had to use Red Ring Cricket Gu to barely maintain the pace, though in the end he did not fall too far behind. That much at least showed that his foundation was still solid enough to support him. What surprised the others even more, however, was Fang Yuan. Throughout the entire stretch, he stayed very close behind them. He did not fall back, he did not stumble. He did not show the slightest sign of someone who had only just broken through, whose whole body ought to have still been exhausted and sleep-deprived. Even Kai Cheng could not help looking at him with disbelief. He had originally thought Fang Yuan was only using the rules as an excuse to latch onto the team. But after running for real, he discovered that this man did not resemble some rookie separated from his team in the slightest. Even Kai Shan secretly gave him another look, and in his eyes there was obvious approval. As they neared the foot of the mountain, the team formation changed. Kai Shan ordered Fang Yuan and Kai Cheng into the middle of the group, that was the safest position. Clearly, though he said nothing aloud, Kai Shan was still protecting the newer and weaker members within the formation. That detail alone was enough to show that his style was utterly different from Jiao San's. He did not need to put on a kind face on the surface. But once they were truly out in the field, he still carried himself like a proper leader. Rather than using missions as a chance to trample newcomers the way Six Snake did. The deeper they went into the mountains, the more chaotic the situation became. Wild beasts fled in panic through the forest. Dark shapes flashed between the trees. The sounds of frantic running wove together with the night wind. At that point, the usefulness of the scouting Gu worm within the team finally became very clear. The one at the front was Kai Shi. He possessed Snake Tongue Gu, a rank 2 Gu capable of sensing heat. Thanks to it, he repeatedly warned the team what lay ahead. At one moment, 3 medium-sized creatures likely to be wild deer. At another, a group of turtle-backed apes, forcing the whole team to change direction and avoid unnecessary collisions. Seeing that, Fang Yuan immediately understood another thing more clearly as well. Though he had already reached rank 2, the Gu worms in his possession were still mostly rank 1. Compared with a properly coordinated team like Kai Shan's, he was still lacking far too much. If he wanted to survive better in the wild, he too needed to acquire a proper scouting Gu worm suited to himself as soon as possible. Before long, the first real warning appeared. A white tiger suddenly lunged out of the trees, clearly having spotted the group long before. If Kai Shi had not sounded the alarm in advance, the whole team might very well have been caught completely unprepared when it slammed straight into them. But this time, Kai Shan's team reacted with almost seamless speed. The old Gu master in the group opened his mouth and spat out a sticky white object that spread in midair into a gigantic spider web, which dropped straight over the tiger. Almost at the same instant, Kai Shan stepped forward, his fist flashing with a metallic glint as he smashed it straight down onto the white tiger's skull. In only 3 short seconds, the tiger was dead. No wasted motion, no chaos. The group did not even stop for long, immediately continuing on, as though that had only been some tiny obstacle in the road. Watching that, Fang Yuan saw the difference between himself and mature field teams even more clearly. He too was now rank 2. But if the situation had been reversed, if he alone had faced that tiger, then even if he could kill it, he would still have had to spend a fair amount of time struggling with it. Yet Kai Shan's team had solved it in only a few linked actions. And the main reason did not lie in cultivation level. After all, the people here were all only around rank 2 themselves. The real difference lay in Gu worms and coordination. A rank 2 Gu in the right support position, a scout giving early warning, a controller pinning the prey down, a main attacker delivering the killing blow. Every link connected to the next, far more powerful than one person trying to hold all the tools yet still having to handle everything alone. Thinking that, Fang Yuan could not help calculating inwardly. If he wanted to truly bring out the full strength of rank 2, then he absolutely had to obtain genuine rank 2 Gu worms soon. Unfortunately, refining and fusing Gu worms had always been an enormous expense. And the primeval stones he currently possessed had already been forced nearly to the bottom. But those calculations lasted only a very short while. Because right after that, Kai Shi at the front suddenly spoke up again. He had discovered Six Snake's team. The moment Kai Shi reported that ahead, Six Snake's group was engaged in battle with a large wild beast. Kai Shan's entire team immediately changed direction and ran over. Barely half a second later, Kai Shi reported more clearly. The thing battling Jiao San's group was none other than a wild boar king. Hearing that, everyone's expression changed. Because that was not the sort of beast anyone wanted to touch lightly. Its body was as large as a small elephant, its strength astonishing, and its temperament extraordinarily savage. Under normal circumstances, if there were not enough preparation, very few teams would willingly risk their lives against it. Even Fang Yuan immediately took notice if he wanted to refine Gu worms later. Then the wild boar king's tusks were exactly the kind of material he wanted badly. In other words, he had already long since set his sights on the prey before him. When the group quietly drew close to the battlefield, the scene ahead also became very clear. In the dark depression of the ground, the 4 members of 6 Snake S team were surrounding and trying to bring down the gigantic beast. Jiao San's crimson rock python was wrapped tightly around the body of the wild boar king like a blazing red chain, constricting and burning at the same time. The boar's body was already covered in wounds, its tail had been cut off, and several places on its hide had been scorched black by intense heat. It was obvious that this battle had already gone on for quite some time, and both sides were being steadily worn down little by little. The people from Kai Shan's team only had to glance once to understand immediately. This wild boar king had already been injured before. 6 Snake S group had merely run into a windfall and wanted to swallow it whole. The only problem was that this time, their appetite was clearly too large. If outsiders had not appeared, they might not even have been able to chew through this prey at all. Naturally, Jiao San's side did not want to share the spoils either. So the moment Kai Shan's group appeared, Fang Zheng immediately ran out, saying outwardly that the situation was still under control, that their side could handle it themselves, and hoping Kai Shan's team would continue onward to reinforce another section of the line. It sounded polite, but everyone understood perfectly well that it was only a way of driving them away. Unfortunately, those few words could not fool anyone. The people of Kai Shan's team only had to look a few times to see that the crimson rock python was already nearing its limit, and could not hold much longer. If things continued like that, 6 Snake S team might not be able to keep the prey. So Kai Shan decided to step in with a brief assisting move, but still kept strictly to the principle. This wild boar king would remain Jiao San's prey. The old Gu master in Kai Shan's team immediately spat out an enormous white spider web that dropped straight over the boar's body. The wild boar king was instantly pinned for a brief moment, seizing that chance. Jiao San hurriedly recalled the crimson rock python and, together with the female healing Gu master on his side, urgently began treating its injuries. Their whole team finally had a chance to breathe. And at that exact moment, Fang Yuan stepped out from behind Kai Shan. Only then did Fang Zheng notice that he was present, and his expression immediately became very strange. Jiao San, by contrast, reacted differently the moment he saw Fang Yuan. It was almost as though a light had gone on inside him. Because this was truly too perfect an opportunity. Outwardly, Jiao San called out loudly, putting on a show of being overjoyed at seeing reinforcements arriving at exactly the right moment. He told Fang Yuan to hurry over and help restrain the wild boar king, buying time so their side could finish treating the crimson rock python. Spoken aloud, it sounded entirely reasonable, but in truth, everyone understood perfectly well that, for someone with no defensive goo worm to move in that close to a wild boar king, was no different from walking himself right to the edge of death. The crucial part, however, was that Kai Shan did not stop it. He only looked at Fang Yuan once, said a single word, and then turned away and left with his team. Since it had already been made clear that the prey belonged to 6 Snake S side, he did not linger any longer. That fit Kai Shan's style exactly, decisive, clear, and never dragging things out. And so, the battlefield was left only to Jiao San's group and Fang Yuan. This time, Fang Yuan did not refuse at all. He moved in very quickly, and the instant he acted, grabbed hold of the wild boar king's 2 massive tusks and pressed down with all his strength. In only a moment, the amplitude of the beast's struggles was visibly reduced. Watching that, even Jiao San had to raise his voice and praise him. On the surface, it sounded like encouragement. But deep inside, he was already calculating something else. In truth, Jiao San had never really considered directly killing Fang Yuan, not out of mercy, but because doing so would be too dangerous and offer too little benefit. What he wanted was only to slow Fang Yuan's growth, make sure he could not mature smoothly, and that alone would be enough to fulfill the arrangement he had with his uncle and aunt. In Jiao San's eyes, this beast tide was precisely too perfect an opportunity to do just that. If he could use wild beasts to leave Fang Yuan seriously injured and bedridden for a long recovery, that would be no different from cutting off his cultivation rhythm entirely. He would not need to make a move personally. He would not need to risk provoking the punishment hall. Everything could simply be blamed on the chaos of the beast tide, precisely because of that. The moment he saw Fang Yuan standing in the most dangerous position on the field, Jiao San had already fully decided on his intent. Then he continued ordering the female Gu master in his team to step forward and use rotten blood grass Gu, preparing to drive it deep into the wild boar king's body to draw out its blood and weaken it further. Everything was proceeding exactly according to his calculations. The only problem was that the one person on the battlefield who truly did not act according to Jiao San's calculations was Fang Yuan himself. Because in this world other people were still bound by family ties, by clan rules, by the notion that clansmen should never strike each other all the way to the end. But Fang Yuan had never once allowed those things to hold him back. He held the boar's tusks down for one more beat. And then, at the exact instant the female Gu master had just moved into position beside the beast's flank, he let go. The wild boar king, which had been heavily restrained, abruptly broke free of the pressure and instantly exploded with all of its pent-up resistance. First it flung its head up violently, sending Fang Yuan flying directly into the air. Then in the next instant it swept its pair of tusks sideways. And the one standing closest, completely unable to react in time, was the female Gu master who had just moved in to use rotten blood grass Gu. Everything happened too fast. A single scream had only just begun when her body was already pierced through by those gleaming white tusks. In the next instant her whole body was flung away like a torn rag doll and crashed heavily onto the snowy ground. No movement, no chance of rescue. She died on the spot. Her corpse flew out like a broken puppet and landed twisted on the snow, utterly motionless. As for Fang Yuan, he too had been flung away, falling from above, crashing through a canopy of branches and rolling into a deep drift of snow. But because he had already activated Jade Skin Gu in time, he felt only a dull ache in his back and was otherwise almost not truly injured at all. Naturally, he could not let anyone see through that. So the moment he got back up, he immediately began acting. He staggered, leaned against a tree, and performed the role of someone who had twisted his ankle and could no longer walk properly. At the same time, his gaze still quietly swept all around, checking whether there were any other Gu masters nearby watching the scene. That level of care was how he always preserved for himself a path of retreat. On the other side, Jiao San's furious roar came almost at once. He shouted directly at Fang Yuan. Blaming him, clearly he had just said he could hold on. Yet in the end he still let go, causing the whole situation to collapse right before them. Fang Yuan only apologized over and over, admitting that he truly could not hold on any longer, his tone sounding both frightened and helpless. The battles, however, had not yet ended. After breaking free, the wild boar king had begun going mad. The remaining 3 people, together with the crimson rock python, continued surrounding and suppressing it. Kong Jing was forced to take out another hidden trump card blade scale net, a metal mesh thick with knife edges and spikes. Once it wrapped around prey, the more the prey struggled, the more it tore itself apart. This time they again called Fang Yuan over to help pull the net tight. But he continued acting like an injured man, saying that his ankle was twisted and he could not run. The others had no choice but to let Kong Jing throw the net out himself. The instant the blade scale net covered it, the wild boar king let out a horrific scream, blood pouring from its body in a continuous stream. At a glance, the situation looked as though it had finally been brought back under control. Even Kong Jing had just barely let out a relieved breath, thinking that at last everything was about to end. At that very moment, Fang Yuan spoke again. He shouted that he was coming to help. And then immediately after, arcs of moonblades sliced through the wind and slashed straight into the blade scale net. Steel wires were severed one after another. The instant a tear opened, the wild boar king surged violently and ripped the whole net apart. In only a moment, the thing they had just struggled so hard to restrain had once again been helped loose by him. Kong Jing stood frozen. The remaining female Gu master cursed in fury. And Jiao San almost lost his mind, roaring that Fang Yuan was exactly the kind of teammate as stupid as a pig. If it had been someone else, perhaps hearing that would already have left him too frightened to speak. But Fang Yuan continued all the way through with the same innocent appearance. He only said that he had honestly wanted to help, and had never expected it would cause disaster like this. And the more he acted like that, the harder it became for others to tell whether he had done it deliberately or by mistake. After being sabotaged by him twice in a row, Jiao San finally no longer dared let him intervene at all. He shouted for everyone to fall back, then prepared to use his true final card. From his nostrils, 2 streams of yellow poison gas continuously poured out, quickly gathering into a dense cloud that enveloped both him and the wild boar king. From outside, only blurred outlines of man and beast struggling within the poisonous fog could still be seen. In the middle of all that, Fang Yuan stepped back and watched. On the surface, he even continued causing trouble, asking the remaining female Gu master to help treat his twisted ankle. She was so furious her face went purple, clearly wishing she could simply leave him to die there and then. Inside, however, Fang Yuan was calculating something even more dangerous. Should he take this opportunity to wipe out Six Snake's entire team as well? The chance was indeed rare. They were already injured, their primeval essence almost exhausted. And in the back of their minds, none of them had yet truly guarded against the possibility that Fang Yuan might intend to kill them. If he struck precisely, it was quite possible to clear them all in one sweep. And that would also count as severing the rope his uncle. An ant were tightening around him from behind. But after only a little more careful thought, he extinguished the idea himself, not out of mercy, but because it was too dangerous. If it left behind even the slightest trace of deliberate setup, or if another Gu master happened to witness it, then the crime of murdering clansmen would be one nobody could save him from. So no matter how regretful it felt, he could only stop at the proper point and no farther. 5 minutes later, the poison fog gradually began to thin. The wild boar king finally collapsed. Jiao San's face was deathly pale, and he was gasping hard, clearly having just expended his most important trump card. He immediately ordered everyone to butcher the corpse, take the spoils, and retreat at once. The smell of hot blood rose thickly from the carcass into the night. The remaining 4 moved around the corpse and began cutting it apart. Around them stretched only black mountains and forest, broken at intervals by the howls of beasts and the sounds of battle from other parts of the defensive line. But at exactly that moment, pairs of green eyes began appearing in the darkness. Then from a distance came the panic shouts of other Gu masters. Wolf pack, not a few scattered wolves, lightning wolves. The instant the warning sounded, everyone's face turned deathly pale all at once. Because the frightening part about lightning wolves was not how strong each one was individually, but that they moved in packs, were fast, enduring, and most skilled at hunting down prey in darkness. In that moment of danger, Jiao San no longer cared about anything else. He immediately turned and fled first. Kong Jing rushed after him in a panic. In that instant, Spoil's teammates' order all of it was cast behind their backs. Fang Yuan, however, reacted differently. Almost in the same instant, he saw one thing very clearly. With the speed and remaining primeval essence of Jiao San's group, it would be very difficult for them to escape. As for himself, if he also tried to run into the dark among the lightning wolves, his chances of survival were not necessarily any better. So he did not run. He decisively knocked the remaining female Gu master unconscious, then dragged both her and himself into the opened belly cavity of the wild boar king. That gigantic carcass instantly became a temporary shelter. He hid himself deep within, using the female Gu master's body as an outer shield to conceal himself. The lightning wolves rushed in. Most of them chased after those who had run, such as Jiao San and Kong Jing. Another portion stayed behind, surrounding the wild boar king's corpse and beginning to tear into it. And in that dark night, amid the sounds of flesh being ripped apart and chewed only a short distance from his ears, Fang Yuan was calm to a frightening degree. He did not burst out, he did not panic. On the contrary, he took out primeval stones and used the chance to restore primeval essence bit by bit. This lightning wolf attack did not last as long as Fang Yuan had expected. Because from the very beginning, the clan's upper ranks had already been monitoring this small beast tide. The lightning wolves were only an unexpected variable. And the moment that variable appeared, the clan's response came extremely quickly. 3 clan elders personally led teams down onto the battlefield. In only a short span of time, the chaos that had begun spreading was forcibly brought under control. Hidden inside the wild boar king's belly, Fang Yuan clearly heard the intense sounds of battle from outside, followed by the screams of several lightning wolves. He immediately understood reinforcements had arrived, so he did not wait any longer. He kicked the unconscious female Gu master who was blocking him away, then climbed out of the boar's belly covered from head to toe in blood. To outward appearance, the scene truly looked hideous. His whole body was slick with blood and gore. Even a length of the boar's intestines still hung tangled around one leg. Even the Gu masters in the middle of battle were startled when they saw a living person suddenly crawl out of a beast's corpse like that. But Fang Yuan did not care in the least. The only thing he truly cared about at that moment was one matter. If he stayed any longer deep inside the boar's belly, and some area attack from the Gu masters outside happened to strike the carcass, then that would be the truly absurd death. Once outside, he only swept his eyes across the battlefield once, exactly as he had predicted. There were 5 lightning wolves in total, and none of them were in peak condition. They were old, weak, or diseased, the lowest stratum forced out from the wolf pack. They had also eaten themselves too full on the wild boar king's corpse, their bellies swollen, their speed and fighting strength both reduced. Meanwhile, the Gu master reinforcements who had just arrived were still rich in primeval essence and in the best possible state for battle. For that reason, the battle did not last long. The 5 lightning wolves fell one after another. And once the reinforcement team had finished them off, they did not continue pressing deeper. They understood very clearly the principle of fighting at night. Once primeval essence had been consumed, the best course was to stop in place, quickly rest, restore, and wait for the next layer of reinforcements to arrive. One scouting Gu master immediately began standing watch. 3 others sat down and absorbed primeval stones to recover their primeval essence. Meanwhile, the healing Gu master bent over to inspect the corpse of the female Gu master lying near the boar's body. The result came quickly. She was dead. At a glance, her body was covered in horrific bites and tears. Her right breast was completely gone, one leg was no longer intact. One arm had been torn open so badly that white bone was exposed. But Fang Yuan could see it very clearly. Those external wounds were not the real cause of death. What had truly taken her life was that her heart had already stopped beating. Because when lightning wolves bit and tore at something, electric current traveled with the attack. This female Gu master had already been unconscious and had been used by him as a shield inside the boar's belly. The current passed into her body and stopped her heart. So no matter how severe the outer wounds looked, the true cause of death was there. The moment the healing Gu master realized this, he flew into a rage. It was obvious that he knew her and perhaps even held special feelings toward her. He raised his head and stared fixedly at Fang Yuan, directly cursing him as a disgrace to men because when danger came, he had hidden behind a woman to save his own life. But Fang Yuan's response remained very calm. He only shrugged and said coldly that in truth both of them had squeezed into the safe place together, and only in the end had he won the position. Hearing that, the healing Gu master completely lost control and rushed straight at him. Unfortunately, he was the support type of Gu master, his personal combat strength extremely weak. Added to that, he still feared clan rules and did not dare openly use Gu worms against a fellow clansman. The result was that he had only just charged in before Fang Yuan kicked him flying. The man fell into the snow head full of powdery white frost and still wanted to lunge up again. But the other teammates had already grabbed hold of him tightly. Fang Yuan only left behind one very clear sentence. If he thought Fang Yuan had committed a crime, then he could go report it to the punishment hall. Fang Yuan would accept it all. That statement was not arrogance, because in his heart, Fang Yuan understood perfectly well that this situation corresponded to the wooden plank incident from the world of his former life. In circumstances where one was forced to choose between life and death, pushing another person into danger in order to save oneself might not necessarily be judged a crime. Even the clan rules of this world had similar clauses. So if one looked only at the act of hiding inside the boar's belly and using someone else as a shield, then the punishment hall might not be able to punish him at all. The truly dangerous point lay elsewhere. If someone discovered that before all this, he himself had knocked the female Gu master unconscious and deliberately turned her into a shield, then the matter would change at once. At that point, the charge would shift into scheming to murder a clansman. And that was the true major crime. That was why, on the way back, Fang Yuan's mind kept constantly turning over possibilities. The sky was dark. The mountain paths had only been roughly cleared. Along the road still lay beast corpses, mixed with the bodies of several fallen Gu masters. And in the middle of all those calculations, something else suddenly appeared before his eyes. The corpses of Fang Zheng and Jiao San. Fang Zheng had already been bitten and torn so badly that his whole body was twisted and unrecognizable. Jiao San's corpse, by contrast, was relatively intact, and at a glance one could tell that before dying he must have fought back extremely fiercely. Nearby lay more than 10 lightning wolf corpses, while the crimson rock python had shattered apart into chunks of red stone. Seeing that, Fang Yuan even felt a trace of delight in his heart. Because if Six Snake's entire team were dead, then a great part of the obstacle blocking his way would disappear with them. But at exactly that moment, he noticed one detail. One of Jiao San's fingers twitched. He was not fully dead yet. At that instant, killing intent in Fang Yuan's heart immediately surged up. If Jiao San were allowed to live, then he would continue being an obstacle. And a chance like the present was truly too rare. But at that exact same moment, more than 10 healing Gu masters were already rushing over from ahead. As they came, they called out to prioritize anyone still alive, and if death was already certain, then to immediately collect the Gu worms. The distance was already too close. Trying to make a move now left almost no time to clean away the traces. So in only an instant, Fang Yuan had to decide, kill or let go. In the end, he chose a third way. He half knelt down beside Jiao San, then took off his outer robe and slowly spread it over Jiao San's face and upper body. By then, that robe had already been soaked through with wild boar king blood, heavy and wet, sticking tightly over nose and mouth. From the outside, the action looked no different from a grief-stricken teammate covering the body of a fallen team leader. But beneath that robe, what was really happening was something entirely different. Immediately afterward, a Gu master from the medicine hall ran over. Seeing Fang Yuan kneeling beside Jiao San's body, that man assumed Fang Yuan was simply overwhelmed by sorrow. Not only did he not suspect anything, he even softened his voice to advise him to restrain his grief, and then took the initiative to check Fang Yuan's injuries. The result of the inspection only made him believe it all more. Because apart from being covered from head to toe in blood, Fang Yuan had almost no real injuries on his body worth noting. That only made it easier for others to assume that he had just survived a deadly battle through sheer luck. By the time the man lifted the robe to inspect Jiao San, everything was already over. The pupils had lost their focus, the pulse had stopped, Jiao San was completely dead. The Gu master did not suspect anything further. He only checked the aperture as well, found that there were no Gu worms left inside, and casually reminded Fang Yuan that all the Gu worms of the dead belonged to their inheritance, and were not to be secretly hidden away for personal use. Hearing that, Fang Yuan only calmly asked in return, "Do you suspect me of stealing the team leader's Gu worms?" His attitude was so steady that the other man did not continue pursuing the matter. And in truth, Fang Yuan had not actually taken Jiao San's Gu worms at all. Not because he had gone soft-hearted, but because gains that small were not worth the risk of dragging more trouble onto himself. At present, he was not even certain he could afford to raise them. And he had even less ability to dispose of the matter cleanly if questioned about it later. And so in the end, no one suspected anything further. Fang Yuan slowly got to his feet. He looked down at Six Snake's cold corpse and stood silent for a very long time. Then beneath the bitter night wind, he finally spoke slowly. "For the sake of the dead, I should all the more live on properly."